research log is really important. Again, put down every website you've been to, put down every book you've looked at, every, let's say, North Carolina Genealogical Society bulletin. Every state has genealogical societies that put out information about ancestors. And if you'll keep up with that, it will really save you a lot of time. Earlier, I don't think either one of y'all were here, we talked about the information in deeds. And it's great. I'm going to give you an example. Other people have heard this example, but I had an ancestor in Tennessee named Elias Butler. He lived in Gibson County, Tennessee. I knew that for sure. I found a book. It was written about Elias Butler of Gibson County, Tennessee, and his ancestors. It was written by a college professor. Gosh, this has got to be great. So I started copying that stuff into my database. Wasn't my Elias Butler. There were two Elias Butlers in Gibson County at the same time. So I knew that my Elias Butler's father was named Christopher Butler, and I knew that they were from Montgomery County, North Carolina. So I went to Montgomery, North Carolina. There were three Christopher Butlers at the same time. To cut a long story short, I'm reasonably sure that I have the right Christopher Butler and the right Elias Butler because Christopher Butler had some water flowing through his land. And he named it Rocky Creek. When Elias Butler moved to Gibson County, Tennessee, he had a creek flowing through his property that he named Rocky Creek. Pretty good indication that that's the right guy. Not 100%, nothing's ever 100% in genealogy, you'll learn that. Death certificates are wrong, oftentimes. I'll tell you another interesting story about death certificates. My grandfather Butler's death certificate says he was born in Ireland. I found him when he was 1 year of age, living on a farm in West Tennessee, and the census report when he was 1 year old said he was born in Arkansas. So I took these two documents to my father, who was still living at the time. I said, "Daddy, how do you explain this?" He said, "Well, son, what you have to remember is that we were from the South, and after the Civil War, we endured 10 years of occupation by the Yankee Army." He said they passed a law that we couldn't even make our own whiskey, and then the TVA came in and stole our land. The long story short is that when somebody from the government is asking questions, we'd just as soon tell them a lie as tell them the truth. And that's why it says that your grandfather was born in Ireland. So that's just a good story to show that what you see is not necessarily right. Now, in a deed abstract, what you want to write down is a description of the property, who sold the property to your ancestor, and who were the witnesses to the deed. And oftentimes, back in the old days, when they were doing deeds, the legal description would be a line going 60 degrees east along Smith's property line. So by looking at the legal description, you can see the names of the neighbors. And many years ago, before the automobile, people married their neighbors. Nobody ever got married pretty much that lived more than a 2-hour horse ride away. So by looking at neighbors, you can expand your family and maybe find the in-laws of your ancestor. Now, in a will abstract, you'll have the name of the testator, the person making the will. You'll have the name of the two witnesses to the will. And in the will itself, in the body of the will, you'll find a lot of names and relationships. I leave to my beloved wife, Sarah, describe the property. I leave to my beloved son, John, this. My son, Samuel, has already received his share by a deed on a certain date. So you get all the children, even sometimes the children who are not getting anything under the will, but you'll get their names. So you'll want to write all of that down and on a form we call a deed abstract form, which are easily obtained on the internet, very inexpensive. So you have deed abstracts, will abstracts, and then court records. When people died without a will, they had to administer the estate, and the person that was appointed to handle the estate was not the executor, because the executor is the title given to somebody who's operating a will. The administrator handles estates of those who died without a will. And the administrator will have to post a bond, and before they can do that, they have to tell you what's in the estate, because the bond will be based on the value of the estate. So oftentimes you're going to get how many cows, how many horses, how many pigs, how many barrels of wine, how many bales of cotton, how many bales of hay. You'll find out a lot about the lifestyle of your ancestor by looking at those court records. You're also going to see that the county court covered all the business of the county. And when they were building a road back in those days, they didn't have a road department. They'd say, John Jones is going to head up the committee to build this road, and they'll list 4 or 5 people that are working on it, and they go out and build the road. So, by the way, that's patriotic service during the American Revolutionary War. You'll see that there's maybe need to build a bridge, and they'll have some of your ancestors' name building a bridge. They'll list who was on the grand jury, who was on the petty juries, who was charged with fornication, or who was charged with trespass. And so all the criminal records will be in there, and it will say who the judge was, who the parties were, who were the members of the jury, and you're going to find your ancestors involved in the day-by-day activities of their community. A lot of times you won't find your ancestor in the census, but you will find them on the tax lists. And oftentimes the tax lists are going to tell you more than just they were there and were taxed. Back in those days, they had, in colonial days, they had polls. And I'm not talking about poll taxes that were in the early and middle 1900s. I'm talking about a poll was any male under 16. So you can see that there was a child living in the home, and when he became 16, he paid tax as an adult. So it helps you say, well, I know that my great-grandfather's oldest son was my Uncle Sam, and I know, and you can tell when he became 16, that way to give you a better idea of